version of my podcast, Smart Sex, Smart Love, where talking about sex goes beyond the taboo and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Winifred Reilly, a licensed marriage and family therapist, author, and lecturer who focuses on helping couples create loving and satisfying relationships. In her nearly 40 years of clinical practice in Berkeley, California, she has helped more than 1,000 couples build strong, loving relationships, no matter how frustrated they were or how long they've been stuck. She's the author of the relationship advice blog, Speaking of Marriage, and the author of It Takes One to Tango, a book that empowers one partner in a marriage to create far-reaching positive changes, even if the other partner does not join in the effort. She has written articles that are published in the Huffington Post, Real Simple, Reader's Digest, The Good Men Project, and Redbook. Winifred has also been interviewed by NPR, The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Chicago Tribune, and WebMD. Welcome, Winifred.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you, too. I've been wanting to have you on my show for a while after I've always liked the title of your book. And then I bought it, and I've not read the whole thing, but I've read a lot of it. And I think it's a really important, like in therapy world, we always talk about, no, you've got to have another partner to work through these issues. You've got to come in as a couple. And I think the general population feels the same way. But you said, wait a minute, not always. And so I guess my first question to you would be, can you talk about what it means when you say it takes only one?
Yeah, conventional wisdom always says it takes two. You need two people with an equal commitment. You need two people putting 2 feet into solving the problem. And that in order for good things to happen, you have to meet in the middle. You have to meet each other halfway. You have to compromise. And unfortunately, that's just not exactly how it works. What happens if you're in a relationship where, your desire for change, it's like 80-20, or it's, 60-40 or 90-10. One partner has a longing for change, a vision for change, and the other one, digs in his heels, or she says things are fine as they are, or they say, I'm too afraid. And, couples therapy, is the first step toward divorce, or maybe they've got one foot out the door, or they have so much anxiety. There's a million reasons why someone doesn't engage. And so the problem with the it takes two paradigm is that it keeps people stuck. It's a disempowering model when really, it's like one person taking the lead can create change. It's so rather than be disempowered or wait for your partner to change. I mean, everybody listening here has probably already tried to change their partner and has discovered that there's this limited efficacy there.
And I always say, even with superpowers of a psychotherapist, it doesn't work, right?
That's right. Especially, yeah. Well, as when you hear about, my challenge of figuring all this stuff out, as a therapist, it doesn't make a difference. Especially, a friend of mine said, if you're married to a therapist, you've really signed up for residential treatment.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so that's one of the things I loved about your book is that you were open about your own journey and your own sharing, which is very much the way I do my work as a humanistic type therapist. So you said you had to tackle your own relationship struggles by yourself, one to tango approach. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I go into it in great length in the book because it basically is how I started to take the theories I was learning and the stuff I'd learned in graduate school and the work I was doing with my clients. And I thought, if my own marriage is difficult, rather than give up, how about if I actually experiment with all the theories that I know? So if I back up a little, my husband and I were young when we got together, and we had terrible skills. We had terrible role models. We had no idea. Two of us are very headstrong. So there was a lot of head banging and a lot of, it was very emphatic, it was a lot of passion, but a little too much. And so we thought, oh, well, all you need is love. Right. So anyway, around 10 years or so in, we were getting worn out because of these kind of circuitous arguments. People call up couples therapists like, we have the same argument over and over, and I'm banging my head against the wall. So we sort of felt like we were on the hamster wheel in hell, and we just couldn't actually. And so rather than give up, rather than get a divorce, and we had tried couples therapy where one of our therapists said, you guys are so great together, except when you're not. And it was like, yeah, when we're not. And,
Right.
and I have no idea why you're fighting like this. I mean, it was crazy. So I thought, okay, I will take everything I know. And the key pieces of what I was working with were I was trained in a developmental model. And the simple explanation for that is people progress from the kind of honeymoon connected stage to needing to be able to deal with difference and needing to be able to deal with a little space that the counterintuitive idea is when you have the capacity to stand alone and stay connected to yourself, you have a greater capacity for intimacy with another person. And so, and I think I'll say some more about that in a bit, but I was going with the principle of we have to go up the developmental ladder, and the place that most people get stuck is the stage where you have to deal with your differences. We can't go to sameness. We're not on a honeymoon. We aren't going to be able to agree. And how am I going to hold myself steady in the face of your disapproval or your disagreement or your lack of validation or, or your name calling or whatever you do when you get anxious and you feel like you're threatened. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, so I have to learn how to deal with difference. I have to be able to stand on my own feet. And I also had a lot of training in systems theory, which basically says when you change one part of a system, you influence the whole system. And so I thought, okay, so if I can't get my husband to buy in, it wasn't that he was like, I hate therapy and I won't do it. He just thought, I don't get this thing about needing to be separate in order to be connected. And so he wasn't really on board. And he thought I'd joined some kind of a cult, actually. And so, anyway, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And I thought the other principle, so there's that, and the other principle of pay more attention to yourself and less attention to your partner. Stop trying to change your partner and change yourself. So I thought, okay, what is the one thing that if I could change that, I would not want to leave my husband? And the thing I wanted to change was how I felt when we argued. And how I felt when we argued was that I would be disoriented. He was good. And so it was like being in Squid Ink with him, and he would just throw out all this stuff and I'd be like, I don't get it. And it was very confusing. Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about like your shoes on the stairs, and now we're talking about my personality. Like, how did we get there? And it was just like, and so I thought that's the experience that I need to change. So when I tell people, pick one thing to change, sometimes it's a behavior of yours. I'm aggressive, or I'm too wimpy, or I'm not nice, or I don't say thank you, or, but sometimes it's an experience, how I feel about myself when I am with you. That's a lot of it for people. And so that was the thing I worked on. And it took a long time for me to actually be able to stay present when when we were having an argument, when he was kind of switching subjects and calling me names and the way I did it was that I would actually had to step outside the room for a minute and kind of reconfigure my thoughts. And then I'd be like, hold on a minute, I got to pull myself together. And then I would come back in, and then I get lost, and and eventually I didn't have to leave the room. And so I discovered that and that was really where my experiment with unilateral change, one person taking the lead. And what surprised me, but not because I knew the theory, was that as I was changing, he began to change. And it wasn't because of my instructions. It was that the Velcro of what we were doing, wasn't sticking on the same things. And he began to let more things go, or it was nicer not to be going on that wheel. So that's actually how I began to work with this and started bringing this to my clients with like you can do it. You don't actually have to, you don't actually have to get your partner's buy-in. In fact, it's fine not to have your partner's buy-in because it's your work, which doesn't mean your partner doesn't have any work to do.
Okay, because I love what you're saying, but I mean, I think a lot of people listening would say they would feel resentful and it would be really difficult for them to only be the one taking the lead. What about my partner? What do you say to that?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it would be great if your partner, was jumped on board, and maybe your partner will. But you see, if you think about like why I wasn't resentful was that I felt empowered. I felt like I'm no longer going to be driven crazy by this nonsense that this guy does when he feels cornered. And eventually I could just see through it. It was really empowering. And, and so it's kind of, I'm going to tell people, take a leap of faith. You're not dragging your partner's carcass around. You're not taking responsibility for all their garbage. You are just empowering yourself to be in a different position. Here's another example of how it works. People are like, I no longer am going to get in the car with you when I think you've been drinking so much. If I have to, I'm taking an Uber. Or I'm not going to stand by when you're shouting or shaming the kids. It's just a no pass anymore. Or I'm going to start talking about sex whether you're uncomfortable with it or not. It's like, that's what I mean by unilateral change. If you think about it, all change really is unilateral. Somebody comes up with a good idea. Let's invent the light bulb. Somebody comes up with a good idea and then goes about trying to make that thing happen. In the rest of the world, we're like, yeah, be a leader. In a relationship, oh no, we're supposed to be in tandem. And so It's like, yeah, be a leader, take a lead. It feels good.
It
doesn't mean instantaneous either. It doesn't mean like, you know what to do and it's really fast. It took a year for me to stop having my head spin.
That's helpful to know because people, I do think, want more instant results. And when they don't get that, they just drop it because they think, well, they're going to feel like I'm doing this all by myself. My partner's not doing anything. And if I'm not seeing results, then what's the point?
Yeah. Well, I like to say there's this Japanese proverb, which is fall 7 times, stand up 8. It's like if the thing you're doing isn't getting you there. I literally experimented with how come I get so disoriented? How do I lose my IQ when I'm arguing with this man? And it's like, how do I feel so like, what? And then I just realized he just changed the subject, and we laugh about it now. We don't fight like that. We laugh about it because it was like, if as a friend of mine said, if you're losing on the subject matter, go for character assassination. So it's like, and I was just like, wait, I'm trying to be fair. Robert's Rules of Order. You should talk. I should talk. It just, and so once I sort of saw it, it didn't have that disorient. I was like, oh, he's just scared. Oh, he just feels threatened. All right, I can relax. He's just saying a bunch of stuff. Really? And then I could go, you really think that? You really mean that? Let's go back a minute, and it was just then it just dissolved. But like I said, not instantly. It took a long time, but I was committed because I didn't want to leave this guy. Like the therapist said, it was really good, except when it wasn't.
Yes. And I like what you're saying. When we think of systems theory in the therapy world, we're always thinking of it in terms of pathological, right? One person's not holding their own weight up or whatever. So everyone has to, come in and recalibrate to, like one car wheel doesn't work, all the other 3 wheels have to work. But you did it, you shifted into something positive and said, wait a minute, if you do something different in a positive way, then it can create a positive into the family.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's ecological theory.
Yes.
Really. I have training in ecological family systems where if you clean up one part of a river, suddenly there's fish. You're working the whole system. If I'm managing my reactivity, we can't really have an escalating fight. You could start yelling and I could be like, hey, do you think you might want to slow down there a little, honey? But if I go and you go and you go and you go, so systemic change is that you begin to change your piece of the system.
And are there times that you don't advise this when a client comes in and you're like, no, this is not a situation where this will work?
Yeah, basically there's just one condition when you're not safe in the relationship. And I don't mean not safe like because your partner is, gets grumpy or like, I mean like if there's domestic violence,
Mhm.
if there's kind of psychological abuse, and your focus needs to be on making yourself safe, not figuring out what your part is. I mean, it's good to figure out what your part is, but not focusing on, I'm just going to let my partner kind of do their thing while that's like, nah, don't do this. This is not for you.
Okay. All right. And in the book, you talk about 5 things that you should do to take the lead.
Yeah.
What
No,
are they?
this is where I have a list. Okay.
All right, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. All right. First one, you need to give up the it takes two belief set.
Hmm.
You have to set aside all the 50-50 fairness stuff and the thing about we have to work in tandem as a team. I'm not asking you to carry your partner's dead weight. I'm just asking you to figure out some way that you want to change something you're doing and see what happens in the system. So that's the first one. Second one, you just need to train a sharp eye on your own behavior. You have to figure out, what am I doing here? It's whatever your starting point is. You have to pick something. You can pick something big. I tell people, pick something that you really that you're willing to work really hard for, that really matters.
Hmm.
If you're wobbly somewhere, or you're aggressive somewhere, or you're not receptive, or you don't speak up, pick something, or you don't like a way you respond to something your partner does. Those are the sorts of things like, what can I control? I couldn't control my husband's ridiculous fighting style, but I could control how crazy it made me, how I responded to it, how I calmed down, how I was able to manage to hold on to my own thoughts. You have to tolerate aloneness. If you think about the position you're taking, you're separating yourself, and you've got to stand on your own feet. You have to validate your own set of behaviors. Nobody, your partner is not going to say, I really like you taking me on. They're not. I'm so happy that you won't get in the car with me, when I'm like smoking a joint. Like, no, you have to just, you have to take the lead even when you're not in agreement. If you ask people, like, what do you think your partner's work is? They will never say, my partner's work is to get herself on her feet so I don't make her head spin.
Mm-hmm.
No, my partner's work is she should be nicer. She should, like she should be more like I want her to be, not like, yeah, it's really great that, she's really challenging all our basic belief sets.
Mm-hmm.
No, people are not signing up for that. Speaking of belief sets, the fourth one is, every relationship has unspoken rules. We can talk about this. We can't talk about that. I can't challenge this. But if you bring that up, then I'm going to bring this up. So maybe, then a lot of them are very collusive. And so you actually, in order to grow, you are going to have to challenge some of the rules and belief sets that are not healthy or constraining you, and step out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is, you have to be willing to learn from your missteps. You have to take the long view. This is not an instant change thing. Although when it starts to happen, it can actually kind of go from slow to fast. Like the day that I no longer needed to walk out of the room, it was kind of like I'd popped out of gravity, like some kind of, and I was like floating. I was like, ooh, this is really nice.
And wait, how did you know that you didn't have to walk out of the room? What was changed about him?
Because I didn't feel confused. I could just see that he was just switching the subject, and that he looked really threatened. And he was like, I would kill my opponent before I lose. He grew up with a bunch of brothers. You kill your opponent, you never lose. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, oh, so that's what he's doing. But I couldn't see it because it was so disorienting.
So he didn't change, you changed.
And at that point, he had not changed.
At what point did he?
It was kind of gradual, but what I began to notice, there was a time when we started to get into one of our circuitous arguments. I had said, do you think you could, we have like a messy neat thing. And so he's like, I'm too slow and I don't, I don't live within time. And I think he's too messy. So we kind of go around on that. And so I asked him to clean up some kind of mess and he got defensive and I just looked bereft and he paused and he goes, so let me reiterate this. When you ask me to do something and then I attack you for asking me, you feel really invalidated and upset, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, okay, I see that now. I just about dropped dead.
Wow.
It's like,
Yeah.
and it was because somehow some kind of sticky, confusing, defensive pattern. I mean, I really can't tell you how that happened, but it was like, yeah, I was just like, okay, now I don't have to kill this guy.
Right.
I'm good. And it was just, and so we started to have more, or there'd be times where we would start to get into something and he's like, this isn't really good. I think we should stop. Like, let's just not get on the wheel. Okay. So he began to take also leadership moves.
Yeah. Did you tell him what was happening, what you were doing differently or no?
No, I didn't tell him. I've like a basic scientist mentality, which is that you don't want to pollute the field with too much information.
Right.
What was he going to do? Oh, I'm going to try changing unilaterally and you don't have to do a thing.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Or like, yeah, I'm going to sneak this, because he wouldn't have thought that what I really need to work on was not being confused by his fighting style. That was like he had no idea. I just needed to stop being annoying or something,
Do you find with clients this is a hard sell?
No, because everybody already knows that their partner isn't changing. Like they can't jump up and down, demand, scream, yell. And I don't exactly, unless they've come to me after they've read my book, I don't exactly say you're going to have to do this alone. It kind of happens organically in the therapy where I begin when I meet a new couple. First thing I say is, with each separate person, what is it that you personally would like me to help you with? So I'm basically setting the stage, not like, so what's happening with the two of you and what is your mutual goal?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm like, what do you need to work on that you need help? That if that was different, when they start to talk about their partner, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I listen to that and I'm like, so what would you like me to help you with? And so people get from the beginning, this is what we're doing.
I feel like you're a lone voice in this field. Do you know of anyone else who's talking like this?
Yes. So my original training was with Ellen Bader and the Couples Institute.
I forgot. I love Ellen Bader.
Yeah. So I worked for like 9 years with Ellen.
Yeah.
And then I trained with Dave Schnarch for about 5 years.
I loved him too.
And he basically both have this differentiation-based model, which is that you get better connected to yourself so that you can get connected to someone else. It's not we get connected together and then it's great. It's, I have to be, if I'm leaning on you, it kind of looks like this. But if I'm on my feet, we can get this close.
But I still feel like both Ellen and David did that in the context of relationship therapy, where you're doing it in individual therapy.
Well, I'm doing it in both because, the secret really is in this model. Couples therapy is really psychotherapy with two patients.
Yes.
It's really, I'm going to help you become a healthier person. I'm going to help you become a healthier person. And I'm going to help your system use the healthier parts of both of you. So it really is kind of individual to some extent. But what's good about this, and I've actually started to do some trainings for therapists on this, on how to work on individual client issues, relationship issues without taking sides. Like, how do you, it's kind of like, oh, your partner does that. Oh, you're in bad shape. It's like, oh, your partner does that. That's kind of annoying. What do you want to do with that? You know? And so I'm wanting to empower people. I mean, who wants to be completely at the effect of their partner's anxiety?
Right. Right. And still, it took me years. I've been with my husband 30 years. I would say it took me 15 17 years to finally go, all right, he's right about me. I'm too angry. And I go to anger really fast because I come from a family that didn't listen to me. And the only way they would listen to me is if I got angry. But they really wouldn't still listen to me. They'd react to me, but
That's
not listen to me.
terrible feedback, right? Yeah.
Right. It was terrible. I had to take I had to do, without knowing I was doing it, I had to just change myself. I knew I was changing myself, but I wasn't sure that it would change him. And it did. It freed up space so he could talk to me.
Yeah. And so when we create, so it can go either way, it's a courageous path because it can go either way, which is it can take people a long time before they can get close to you and say, Joe, your anger is really a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It could take a while. And if we, and you might at first be like, no, blah, blah, this, that, and so, but if they don't give up and they stay and they don't get angry, it's like, if I'm saying to somebody, this thing that you're doing is really not healthy and I'm not escalating and I'm not blaming them, they're going to eventually hear you. And so that's a lovely thing. It's like, eventually the stuff that your partner will tell you about yourself is actually accurate. Initially, mm-hmm. It's like, you're not nice enough and but really I'm a wimp. And so it's not the issue.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
What would you say I haven't asked you so far that you want to make sure the listeners know about your book, your work?
I want people, a couple things. I want people to know that it's actually not as hard as you think. It sounds hard.
It does sound hard.
It sounds hard. But see, it's a lot easier than waiting for your partner to change. And if you have a vision for change, if you want something, and it really is empowering to take a risk. And we don't grow without taking a risk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you could live your life in your comfort zone and it will be very stuck and boring. And so when you want something and you go for it, it's exhilarating. But remember, you're not going to get a standing ovation when you confront things in your relationship that are not healthy. And so, I mean, even to this day, my husband and I are still growing. We're about to have our 45th anniversary.
Wow.
And we're, and we're still growing, and we still, have things to say to each other. Like, when you do that thing, this is what happens, and this is not good. And it's like, okay, I need to think about that. Like, we have not stopped growing and understanding the way we interact. I mean, you put any two people together in a space, and you're not the same.
Yeah.
You don't want the same things. You're more often out of sync than you are in sync, and so you have to work to be understood. You're not going to necessarily be understood. You have to be patient. You have to be curious, and you never stop actually learning things about yourself.
I think you said so many important things, but one of the most important things you've said that I want everyone to hear is even after 45 years, you're still working on things. There are still issues. Things get better. You probably come back much more quickly when you have a conflict, if there's any kind of rupture. That's what I notice in my 30 year, but that it doesn't stop just because you're a therapist, you've done all this work, know.
Right. No, because, first of all, we're not static.
Right.
I mean, my husband has actually recently has an annoying behavior. And I said to him the other day, I've been with you for like 45 years. How did you just start doing this thing? Let's say let's say he's like started cracking his knuckles or something. It would be like out of the blue, like, really? You found a way to be more annoying? It's like, and we can laugh about that stuff because, we change, we get older, we can't hear each other as well. It's like a quarter of the time you're like, what did you say? It's terrible. So, yeah.
All right. Well, tell us where they can find you, your trainings, your book.
Okay. So there's a link that I'm hoping that you put, which is so I have a blog which I haven't written in quite a few years, but there's about 50 posts in there. One in particular kind of went viral around the world, like literally all over the world. And it was one that I wrote for my 36th anniversary. It's called 36 Things I've Learned in 36 Years of
Mm.
Marriage. And somehow that one like really spoke to people. And I've had people even to this day sending me emails saying that they decided to work on one of these things at a time.
Mm.
And, there are things like, when in doubt, try and ascribe the highest possible motive to your partner. Or if you think your relationship would have been easier with somebody else, you're probably wrong, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so that one is just one. If people want to read, it's got 36 things to really think about.
I'm going to read it.
And it's a good one. And I wrote it in about 30 minutes.
Great.
I was
All right.
sitting at a cafe and I wrote it, and it was just sort of the right thing. And then there's my book, which really talks a lot about the developmental model and growth and how to do this unilateral thing. And it talks about the various ways in which my clients, so it's a kind of a braiding between my learning, my marriage, and my clients. And it really is a road. It's called It Takes One to Tango, and the editor, right before it published, they put the subtitle on it, How I Rescued My Marriage with Almost No Help from My Spouse, and How You Can Too.
I liked it. It was compelling for me to pick it up and want to read it.
Yeah. Well, it was, and it's a fun book. It's not like it's kind of a memoir of self-help.
Yes.
And the thing about it, and the thing I bring to my work, is we're all in the same boat. Relationships are very difficult. And so, like, as a therapist, if my model is like, I have it all together and you people are really behind the 8 ball, it's not really gonna, I like to say, like, oh yeah, that's really hard,
Mhm.
my husband doesn't close drawers either. I really empathize with you, and so we're all just trying to figure this out.
Yeah. It has been a pleasure having you on my show, Winifred. Thank you so much. And we will put all those links to everything that you talked about, your book and your trainings. And then if you like this podcast and you enjoy Smart Sex, Smart Love, you can hear more at going to smartsexsmartlove.com. It's also on my website, joecourt.com. And then you can find me on every single platform, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's at Dr. Joe Court, DrJoeKort. Thanks so much for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.